Dave Gachdina, hello everyone. Sorry for the short delay there, but you're very welcome to this month's live Q&A with myself and Siobhán this evening. So we got some lovely questions in from all topics really. We've stuff about general learning Irish, things about specific phrases and everything. So it should be lovely. So I hope you have a nice cup of tea or a drink, or you're ready to sit back and enjoy the next hour with us. So kind of start to Siobhán.
Oh, gan wa haar fad, agus tú hain.
Gabroanish, come on. Níl gurán to dum. All right, so bhaile tas nu leis an géad cheist mar sin.
Iontar fad, mar sin. An cé cheist atá agan. So our first question is from Catherine O'Brien in Brisbane, Australia. Diolch, Catherine. And she says, I used to be good at Irish in school but have forgotten it. I would love to brush up on my Gaeilge to teach my 3-year-old son. So that's a great goal you have there, Catherine. And Aisling, what advice would you have there?
Yeah, I think it's so lovely that you're all the way in Australia and you want to teach your son. It's really lovely, because I think sometimes when people move abroad, they feel that sense of connection to Irish still, and it's lovely that you want to pass it on to him. So I say Gaeilge that first of all, but I think it depends on how much you've forgotten. So what I would recommend first of all is to try and maybe read something or listen to something in Irish and see how much you can understand and kind of where you are really with your Gaeilge. So there's a very good resource that I'll recommend probably a few times throughout this Q&A, but it's called leiglat.com, and it's a great resource. I think it was mainly set up for primary school teachers that, you know, maybe want some resources in the classroom, but it's brilliant for learners and for people looking to maybe bring a bit of Irish home as well. And they have loads of stories and poems there, mainly for children. And they also have a sound clip with each one, so you can listen to it. And there's different dialects for each one as well. So they have speakers from all over the country. But it might be an idea to maybe open up a story there with your son and read it together and see where you are. Also, Cúla Cahir, which is a kind of subsection of TG Cahir, they've been doing lots of great videos for parents that are homeschooling at the moment during the pandemic. So they have all sorts of things. They have music lessons, cooking lessons, all different things, all through Irish for Kids. So that could be something you could watch together as well. And with that as well, there'd be subtitles. So if you are lost or you feel like you need to have a bit more direction, there's subtitles there. There's also great Facebook groups for parents wishing to, you know, raise their children through Irish or bring a bit more Irish into their family life. So one of them is called Tóg Mísle Gaeilge Iad. It's a Facebook group, which basically means let's raise them through Irish. So you can, you know, join that if you want. And also we have a section on our website for members, Grow members or Explore members, where we've categorized the best lessons for parents and children. So you could go there and have a look. But I think if you do feel like you're struggling a lot with it, you could maybe decide, right, I'm going to learn with my son. We're going to learn together. And it could be something you do together as opposed to trying to teach him. But I think it's a great idea. So do keep us posted on how you're getting on, because I think it's really lovely. So Mullinoiga is chucik she, as they say. So yeah, Gaeilge that, well done, and keep us posted. What would you have to say about that, Siobhán?
Oh, I agree. Like it depends. It does depend on how much you've forgotten and how much you had originally. That's for sure. And but really, any sort of practice, like as you were saying there, Aisling, trying to read or something or listen to something, any sort of exposure at first, that's very helpful. And there's just so much you can do. Of course, you can build up your own confidence by kind of getting back to the basics and building up from there. And you can also, of course, bring your son into it as well. And as you're maybe reviewing or revising the basics, you could have him just like interact with it too. But there's loads and loads of stuff there as well. That's more children orientated, but that's great for adult learners. As you were saying there, Aisling, Leiglat is wonderful, just a wonderful site, and it has really simple stories like this, just like 2 sentences long, with pronunciation. You can hear it as well, which is excellent, and you can see it. And but there's also short stories by the likes of Patrick Pearson. There's also even a book by Pádraig Ó Siochrú, who's so these are famous Irish authors. So you've got everything from a book to tiny little stories, and you can hear them all being read aloud. So it's wonderful. And by an actual human as well, not a synthesized thing either. So it's a wonderful website. And there's also an organisation, an Irish language organisation called Learning Ale, and they have a not a website, but well, they have a website as well, but they have a YouTube playlist called Ceobháisteach. So that's worth Googling. And in the blog post that's linked in the description of this video, you'll see later on after this, I'll put up the links to these resources as well. But if you just Google Learning Ale, Ceobháisteach, you'll see the YouTube's playlist, and there's 135 children's books there being read aloud, and the camera is situated in a way that you can actually read the book as well as it's being read. So it's brilliant. That's an excellent one. There's also, what else do we have? There's also the website Irish for Parents, which is very helpful as well. It has lots of everyday phrases, which I'd recommend that you try and incorporate into everyday language, because that's the thing for kids. It's more the everyday stuff that of course that they're going to be concerned with, not exactly studying, especially a 3-year-old. And you can learn that way yourself as well by just saying "Ceaca, go sleep" or something like that. And there's lots of phrases there for that. And there's a book as well, Lawer, with similar phrases, and it's called Gascanch, and that is phrases in all 3 main dialects to help you just find the right way toward something when you're speaking to your child. So that's one way you can learn yourself, by just figuring out how to say something like just give a simple command, or just to say something about the weather, or just something like that, or to ask a simple question. So you can start off with the simple stuff and just add it up bit by bit, add more and more Irish to your everyday conversation. So that's what I'd recommend there. And as I was saying, I'll add those links in the blog post linked below.
Brilliant. I apologise to Siobhán. Every time we do this, I always add loads of resources and never give her the links, and she always has to put them in later on. So my apologies. I must help you out next time. I'm only realising now I'm always dropping these things in, and Siobhán's like, "Oh my God, you have to give me the links." Okay, so the next question is from Carlos, and he's in Mexico. So hola. He says, "I've just started with Irish by using Duolingo, and he's also joined the free course. So that's our taster program, if anyone is wondering. How good or helpful do you think Duolingo is?" So I think Duolingo is great for the very early stages, when you're probably you're kind of trying to hammer home the vocabulary and the syntax and things like that, so the structure of sentences, and the pronunciation as well, because you can press play and it reads out the words for you. But I do think that it can get a bit tedious after a while, once you've advanced a bit, or once you kind of want to start writing with the language or speaking the language, it can get a bit tedious. So that would be my opinion. I think it's great for the start, but maybe, once you've kind of got your foundation, you might want to start trying to actually engage with the language a bit. What would you say, Siobhán? Would you agree?
Oh, I agree. That's the thing. It's not a one-stop shop kind of thing at all. It's good for it's like a springboard kind of a thing. It's good for getting going, and it's also good for keeping up to scratch and reviewing things and revising and not falling behind. So if you're doing another course, or if you're doing lessons or anything, it's good as well just as like a little revision thing. So it's quite good for that. Kind of like how people do crosswords. It's good in that sense. So it certainly has its uses. But you definitely need more to get in any way proficient. You need more than Duolingo. It only goes so far. So you need more advanced resources for listening and writing, of course, and of course speaking and stuff like that. So it's good, but you need more than just Duolingo. But it's good to have as one of your resources among many. or at least a few anyway. So that's it. Yeah. So let's see then. Let's see what else we have. So our next question then is from Aisling in Australia, San Austral. And his question is, what is the best piece of advice you have received during your Irish language learning journey that you can or would pass on to learners? Guramagat Aisling. And he says, by the way, absolutely love your passion for the language and I've learned heaps from you both. Guramila Mahagat Aisling. So, Aisling, what would you say to that? What's the best piece of advice?
I think, first of all, thanks very much, Aisling. I think I always enjoy whenever you're on the Gaeilge and Cogra Mugger, you're always very eager and have very unique questions. So I love hearing from you. So thanks for submitting this question and for saying that. That's really sweet and kind. I think that's a very tough question, but the minute you said it, I said I wasn't going to overthink it and just try and remember pieces of advice that really helped me. So the first one might be a bit specific, but it's kind of to do with the genitive, so the tishel Gaeilge, and it seems to be this kind of, it's the enemy of the Irish language learner. Everyone kind of is afraid of it, and it is, the way it's kind of explained can be quite overwhelming because there's all the the rules and the different cases and all this kind of stuff, and it can be a bit daunting. But my friend who is a native speaker said, if you can kind of figure out what sounds the best in the genitive, so once you kind of understand the rhythm of it, try not to overthink it. So for example, if the word for street is an troid, and then if you want to say the end of the street is going to be bun and an troid, and the thing that sounds most natural to me is bun na stráide, and that's what it is. Now that might not apply to any learners out there at the moment listening. You might say, what is she talking about? But that was one thing that came to me. If you can get into the kind of rhythm of the language and how it sounds and how it should sound, sometimes you have that confidence then to guess and get it right. So try and almost internalize the language first before you get too bogged down with a lot of grammar. Secondly then, which might be a bit more applicable, a teacher in college once said to us very kind of bluntly, you can only kind of go two directions with the language. You can either be learning it or losing it. And at first I kind of thought that was a very harsh thing to say. I was like, oh God, that's very mean, like, is he kind of trying to hint to us that we're all losing our language? But I think it kind of reframes how we view fluency, because I don't think that there is an end point to learning a language ever. I mean, I still come across words in English that I don't know, and I definitely still come across words in Irish that I don't know every single day. And sometimes I find myself getting very cross with myself and saying, oh my God, I've been learning Irish for so long. How have I not reached a point where I could just read something and not know a word? But you will never be at a point, I don't think, where you know every single word or know everything. And it's kind of nice to view it that way, because it means you're a bit easier on yourself. And fluency is kind of a never-ending journey, really. You just get more confident and comfortable with the language. You don't ever get to a point where you know everything. So I think that's helpful in any language learning journey. But specifically with Irish, maybe where, you mightn't have the same resources or the same amount of kind of speakers around you and things like that. So that would be my advice. And what about you, Siobhán?
That's it. I'd say that was great advice there, Aisling. I would say the best advice I could give that's helped me to improve my Irish is listening a ton and reading a ton. And that is, after all, how you can improve your language skills in any language, be it your native language or whatever. Listening and reading. That's how we all learned any language, really, as children. And another thing I find that's really good, and again, I don't think it applies to it doesn't matter, I think, which language you apply it to, but it's forcing yourself to find the correct phrase or word for whatever you're trying to say. So if you're speaking English, of course, you could say, instead of, this is a very simplistic, silly example, but instead of saying the drivey thing, say a car. It's this sort of thing. It's a very simplistic one, but it's the same in Irish as well. Instead of using the English term, especially for newer concepts or more complicated or scientific concepts or the like, instead of using the English term, or even a direct translation of an English phrase. Try and find out what the proper Irish phrase is, what the traditional Irish phrase is, or there's probably a few different ways to say it in Irish, whatever it may be. But try and find the Irish word. And there's no shame ever, no matter your level of Irish, be you a beginner, advanced, you could have a few PhDs in Irish, it doesn't matter. There's no shame in using a dictionary. Never a shame in that. And it doesn't matter, be it a print dictionary, or now it's way easier to use these online dictionaries that we have now. There's a few of them, of course, the best being, if you're going for the traditional dictionaries, you've got changlan.ie and you've got folklore.ie. That's a more modern one. So you've got lots of modern turns of phrase there, and there's tons of examples and example sentences. So it's a great, those two, both changlan and folklore are great websites for that. So of course there are print versions as well of dictionaries that are easy to come by. So that I would recommend that. So whenever you're speaking or writing, if you don't have someone in your household to speak with, get someone online if possible and practice. If it's not speaking like on Zoom or something, you can write messages on like something like Facebook Messenger or something, and strike up a kind of a pen pal correspondence, and that's very handy. And just force yourself as much as you can. There is a lot of forcing there. That doesn't sound that pleasant, but it can. There is, I suppose, that's no pain, no gain, as they say. It can't be like that. It's like when we're children. When we were children, we were often corrected on the mistakes we'd make when speaking, or we'd be told to say please and thank you and stuff like that. We just need to do that now in Irish in a more complex manner. That's pretty much it. And if you're a beginner or more of just an intermediate learner or something, of course that's going to be as drastic as if you're a more advanced learner. But at whatever level, I think those approaches, listening tons, reading tons, and really just trying your best when speaking, and trying to not be too self-conscious or anything, and not really caring about making mistakes, because through making mistakes we learn. Because you kind of have to make a mistake sometimes when speaking. Like, it's going to happen if you speak a lot, you're going to make mistakes. We do it all the time in whatever your native language is. So it's so I'd say to follow those, and no matter the level, and it should help.
Okay, perfect. So then the next one is from another Grow member, and it's Brian. And he says, I have found SoundCloud playlists of recordings of Irish speakers reading books excuse me, for children and young adults. However, the texts are not available to read along. No library where I live has any books as Gaeilge, and international shipping often doubles the cost of books. What are your recommendations for resources for hearing native Irish speakers reading from texts that are also posted online? So this probably quite ties in with the first question. So we're Valatishin a Raggart a Hiban.
Good. Taglor multi-agin. We've lots of suggestions. Of course, going back there to leilet.com, lots of written texts there. As I was saying, there's short stories, there's even a book, and it's not exactly the most childish stuff either. So it's don't be afraid, don't worry about that. Though children's stories, they can be very helpful as well. As they contain lots of useful phrases. But we've got Leilet, which is written aloud, and you can see the text as well, which is very important. And as I mentioned before earlier on as well, Sciobháisteach the Fáiste by Learning Ale, the 135 children's stories there that's being read aloud, and the cameras in such a way that you can also read the book at the same time. So those are just two options, and there's even more. You've also got Fabhal Sciobháisteach the Lenny, which is on YouTube. There's also a website by the same name, and on YouTube you can read the text as the person's reading it aloud in different dialects. It'll actually mention which dialect it's being read aloud in. And if you want to go away from fiction then and into more non-fiction, You've got the likes of Vifax, where you have clips from the news, and there's a PDF, there's a number of PDFs attached with questions, but if you scroll to the very last page of the PDF, you'll find a transcript of the clip, so you can follow that along and you can listen to that as well. And often it'll kind of, sometimes it'll change some words that are very much very colloquial, and it'll change them, but there'll be an asterisk or something, and it'll tell you why they've changed it to another word sometimes. So if you hear a discrepancy, it'll explain why between the sound and the writing. So that's just the story there with Vifax. Very good. So just scroll to the last page of one of the PDFs that's attached to each clip. There's also Nuacht, which is on Soundcloud, and the text, that's slow news, so the news read slowly in Irish, and that's on SoundCloud, and you can read the transcript in the episode description. So if you click into the episode itself, you'll see episode description, and then just click on read more and you'll see it all, and there's even a glossary at the bottom. So that's another great resource. So there's loads of resources there, and I'll link those in the blog post.
Brilliant. Yeah, some of these clips or some of these resources I've never used myself, and they sound amazing, so I definitely must have a look at them. But yeah, I think Gaeilge is definitely a very good resource as well. And as you were saying, Siobhán, there's lots of kind of quite complex stories on there. They're not all just children's stories. There's some that are quite more advanced, so that might be a good option for you. Another thing to check is tuairisc.ie or tuairisc.ie, which is the kind of main Irish language news online news website. If you search in the search bar Focal Agus Fuam, they were doing a series recently enough where they were reading kind of Gaeilge stories, like folklore stories, and they would have the text there as well, often to do with like how places got their name, or stories from certain towns or Gaeltachtaí. So there's lots there as well. And if you're on Instagram at all, TG Cahir have a kind of subsection of TG Cahir called Bluck TG Cahir, and they do great little short videos, and they have subtitles in Irish and in English on the videos. They're doing this kind of series at the moment where they're doing like kindness ráide, like the slang from all the different Gaeltachtaí, and all of the videos are subtitled in English and Irish, which is very rare, like, because even a lot of TG Cahir programs won't have Irish subtitles, they'll just have English ones. So it's nice when you have both, you have the Irish and the English, so you can understand what's going on and then actually see the Irish being spoken. So yeah, there's lots and lots of resources. It can just be kind of hard to find them in one place, but hopefully that helps Brian anyway. Yeah, Siobhán.
Íntar fad an bhfuil tíar fad. Íntar fad agus an chéad cistile. And our next question then is from Christina in Waterloo, Canada. And her question is there a recommended order to the bite-sized coursie? So what would you say to that, Aisling?
Yeah, that's a very good question, actually. And there isn't really at the moment. They're kind of there for you to do as you wish and how you see appropriate. So they're kind of categorized within their smaller subsections. So, you know, work and the weather or something. So you kind of know what the general topic area is. But it's up to you where you want to go. And then if you want to go back and revise maybe more basic things. But we are kind of reorganizing the structure of Coursie a little bit at the moment. So stay tuned, and there'll be kind of a different structure on it. So that might be a little bit more organized for you. But yeah, I think the point of them really is just that you're able to kind of dip in and out of whatever you see appropriate depending on where you are in your learning. So yeah, would you agree with that, Siobhán? Is that...
Oh, I'd agree. And you can also just follow it as it appears, and that won't do any harm either. And if you feel that something's just too advanced for now, skip over it, and you can come back and see it again, as you can mark which lesson you've completed or not, so you can see which ones you haven't completed. So That's what I recommend you to do. So like if there's a whole like a course of irregular verbs, maybe not do the whole course of irregular verbs at once, because that could be overwhelming. So maybe dip in and out of that over a period of maybe a few weeks or something as you're doing some of the other courses. So that's it. So I'd say course by course is well enough, and and if you find something too challenging, you can skip it for now.
That's a very good suggestion actually about the irregular verbs. And I think as well there's some lessons in particular that are very vocab heavy, so maybe don't do a lot of those at once because you might not retain all of it. So try and dip in and out of maybe some videos, some verbs, some vocab, and kind of mix and mash a bit. Okay, perfect. So then the next question is from Padder in Sassana. He's another Grow member. Hello, Padder. And he says, Díobhaite Siobhán agus Aisling tá ceist hapagum. So his whole question here is in Irish, but I'll read it out in English in case not everyone can follow it. So he has a question about the word quid, C-U-I-D, quid. So for example, you say the chuid padracha a raw, so to say your prayers, or chuid airgid, my money. So he's wondering why you don't just say padracha or ma airgid. Why do you have to have the quid in there? So do you want to answer that, Siobhán?
All right. So what I'd say is the thing is about that. Basically, the idea is with these is it's got to do with them being the things being quantifiable, and also the fact that the word quid means a share of something. It can also mean a share of something. You can use it like that, kind of like a portion or a share of something. So if you think of it like that, as it makes more sense. So let's say we had the example there of chuid airgid, my share of money, of all the money in the world. That's your money, or my money, rather chuid airgid, my money, but it's your share of all the money that's out there. So so that's the thing. If it's like a quantifiable thing, like, or if it's in the plural, like chuid leabhar, my books. If it's plural, so there are multiple things involved. Then you could say chuid leabhar, for example, my books. That's one usage for it. And then the other is, even if it's singular, if it's something that's quantifiable. So something that can be counted. So like chuid Gaeilge, as I was saying, like a share of all the Irish that's in the world, but it's your Irish, was a share of all the Irish that's out there. Also, like airgid airgid, our money, that should read as. That is airgid airgid, that is our money, again, our share of money, in a sense, airgid airgid. Now the thing is, quid causes the genitive on Tischel Gaeilge. So you use the genitive form of the noun. So airgid, as you can see here, airgid is the genitive form of airgid, which means money and also happens to mean silver. But that's just something to note there. So there's also some other things such as so again, you could have things such as like chuid banya, because there's a lot of banya, you know, it's not one solid thing really, chuid banya. So you can say that, so it's my milk of the share of milk that exists. So it's often used in that sense. Then when it comes to that, it's not really used though for like solid inherent things like your feet, mochusa. You only have 2 feet. Like mochuid cusa, well, you only have 2. But people do say mochuid gruige, because I suppose you have a lot of hair in your head. So that's, I guess, the logic behind that one. But that's basically the logic, your share of something. So if there's many of them, it's your share of them. You don't really have a choice, I guess, about your feet. You either you have 2 feet or you have 1 foot or something, but you know, you can't really be getting them off other people, I guess. So that's why you don't really say mochuid cusa, you just say mochusa, my feet. And as I was saying, quid also means share, so a share of something. So that's one way of remembering quid. But often they're kind of interchangeable as well. You can you often hear some people say, for example, Gaeilge, and other people saying chuid Gaeilge. But that's the basic rule for it. If it's a quantifiable thing, use chuid, and also if the thing is plural, like what we had there with leabhar, books, but chuid leabhar, my books. So that's the genitive plural there. That's why leabhar just looks like one book there, if you're wondering. So that's the idea there. I hope that makes more sense now. It is a bit of a tricky one, to be honest, because it isn't completely set in stone to my understanding. What would you say to that there, Aisling?
Yeah, that's a very good answer. I saw this question earlier this morning, and I was kind of thinking about it all day. And I don't know if I've ever been explained explicitly why chuid goes before different things, but I was thinking of all the examples in my head, like chuid gruige, chuid Gaeilge. And I think, as you said, it's things you can't quantify. Like, you can't count all the hairs in your head and say, do you know how many hairs you have, or you can't count the amount of Irish you have and say how much you have. So you put chuid there to kind of say it's a portion of it, or a part of it that you can't count or quantify. So I think that's a very good summation of it. But I feel like a lot of the time, and I'm definitely the same when it comes to other languages and with Irish as well, we have questions sometimes that unfortunately there aren't any concrete answers for, and we kind of have to sometimes just guess and maybe accept that it's just a bit strange and it might not have a kind of black and white explanation. So hopefully that helps a bit anyway, Peadar. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
I don't think I've really heard any solid not really any solid explanation of why. You know, it's one of those things. I suppose it is as it is. That sort of thing. But that's, I guess, as much as you can go, as one can go into it.
Yeah.
But that's it. Very good. And bhí an dara chuid sin ag Peadar. So Peadar, a second part to his question.
Oh, he did. Oh, yes.
Sure.
So, yes, he was asking about when you say a cur before, for example, a Ceobháisteach when it's raining, or a sneachta. So a cur plus noun, basically, and he was saying, why is that for some kind of weather phrases and not for others? So what would your take be on that one, Siobhán?
Well, the thing is there, I would say that it's like any form of precipitation, really. That's the idea. Now, I think you were asking there about certain ones in particular, as you were saying there, Peadar. You say a chur farne, or a chur báiste, raining, and a chur fola, bleeding, and the chur sneach, the snowing. So these are things that are like being released in a sense. You're pushing, because a chur means pushing. But you're asking there about some words in particular, and such as Ceobháisteach, which is drizzle. And you're wondering if you could say a chur Ceobháisteach. Now, I haven't seen it used ever, and I haven't heard it used, a chur Ceobháisteach. What I would say is, and any examples I've seen have been of tá Ceobháisteach on, as it's drizzly, you translate it as, but it's literally there is drizzle there. Tá Ceobháisteach on. You also had the word there of Ceobháisteach, or Ceobháisteach, which is heavy drizzle. Now, it's not a word that I hear often, so I wasn't too sure. Now, to my knowledge, I would say that you could either use it as you would use Ceobháisteach and say tá Ceobháisteach on, or I would say that you could, because the word báisteach is in there at the end, I'd say you could possibly use it as a chur Ceobháisteach. I'd say you could use it like that as well. So I'd say you could definitely say tá sé chur Ceobháisteach. It's drizzling heavily. Now, when it comes to, you also had there cluichneachta and flichneachta. So cluichneachta is hailstones. So you do indeed say tá sé chur cluichneachta. I don't think the hailstoning is really a word, but we get the point. And it's hailing, or it's just hailstones falling anyhow. Tá sé chur cluichneachta. So cloch means stone, so stone snow, you're literally saying. It's putting stone snow. Then we've got flichneachta, which is sleet. And you do say tá sé cur sneachta. And flich comes from the word flo, which means wet. So wet snow, which is exactly what sleet is. So it's sleeting or just sleet falling. Tá sé cur sneachta. So you do say those. You do say those indeed. So would you have anything to add there, Aisling?
Yeah, I think that's a very good answer to the question. There was one irregular one I thought of only a few minutes ago, so I don't know if you had time to put it as a label, but the one that's not precipitation but still uses a cur is a cur seaca. If it's freezing, so that's a weird one because there's no precipitation really in question, but a cur seaca shook is, you know, freezing or something is frost, kind of frosty as well. So a cur seaca is freezing, so that's the only odd one out, but usually a cur is precipitation.
And that's the thing about this sort of freezing, of course, seaca. Freezing doesn't really describe it in a sense, because indeed you do say in English it's freezing or it's freezing out, but it's freezing in the sense of frost is forming. So we don't really have a word in English. You never say it's frosting, for example. So it's but that's specific to that. So it's not if you put ice cubes in your freezer and they're freezing. There's another word for that, but this is only when there's frost forming outside. So I suppose it's a weather term. So maybe that's got something to do with it, and the sense that what's freezing is the dew, perhaps the dew in the grass. So perhaps that has something to do with it, or rain that has already fallen. Maybe that's the idea. I'm not too sure the logic exactly of that. But that's a good idea. That's a very good example there, Aisling.
Yeah, that's interesting. It could be kind of like the process of it. You know, if there's a process involved in raining or snowing or freezing, I don't know, there could be a curlish. So yeah, that's very interesting. So will we have a look at some of the questions in the comments? There's one or two questions that are standing out here now.
All right, so let's see now.
So the latest one I'm seeing there, I don't know if you can see it, it's from Peru 2016. He says, Gaeilge, Aisling and Siobhán, do you think it's possible or worth striving for cainteoir dúchais blas, so the kind of tone of a native speaker? He then goes on to say that he's learning the Musgrave dialect as his great-grandmother was a native speaker from Bailach or Ballingeary. So what would you say to that, Siobhán?
Oh, it's definitely possible and worth striving for. Definitely, that's the goal. No matter the language you're learning, that's the goal. It's a bit of a controversial thing, I think. If you're Irish and have grown up in Ireland, born and reared in Ireland, there's often been the question of, well, should you keep your local dialect? Let's say you're a Dubliner and you've got a Dublin dialect or accent, I should say. If you should keep that when you're learning Irish, and that's a bit of a controversial one because, well, it's an Irish accent and all of that. But of course, if that's not the question here, if you're abroad and you don't have an Irish accent in particular, and even if you do, it's up to yourself, of course, these things. But it's especially since you have that link. That familial link, that's a wonderful thing to do, and definitely worth striving for. Definitely, that's for sure. So more can I do again? So best of luck with that. But that's definitely the right thing to do. Definitely. All right. Was there any other ones there that jumped out at you, Aisling?
Yes, actually, there was one. Oh, yes, it's from Earlton. And he says, Mata am bresha agriv, Cian focal nu rudder be ille is fardat I ganund nachi de ganund hain. So if you have extra time, what's your favorite word, or otherwise like a nachkaint or something from a different dialect that's not your own? So great question. Do you have any that springs to mind there, Siobhán?
I would say it's stócach. In the Ulster Irish, I think it's a great word. Instead of I don't know, I think it's a brilliant word. And the way they use it kind of like it means a young man or a youth, but they also use it as in like to refer to a boyfriend And I think it's a great word, just as in that to use it like that. So I think that's a great word, stócach, and even the sound of it, it does give you that idea of a fine young man or something, stócach. So I think it's a great word, stócach. So I'd say that's in Ulster Irish. I'll write that up on the screen as well. So while we're at it, so stócach. There we go. That's stócach. That's Ulster Irish. And do you have any there, Aisling?
I think actually one from the Ulster dialect as well, fadúda. That's a very fun word to say, fadúda, and they use it kind of like about. As far as I'm aware, anyway, I don't actually have any friends that speak Ulster Irish that I would actually engage with quite a lot, but I just hear it on the radio and on TV and stuff. And fadúda, I think it kind of means fui. Like if you're talking about something, a kind fui or dagant, but they'd say a kind fadúda, which is just great. It's great fun. And God, it's hard to even narrow it down now. But I'm trying to think of one in Connemara. They always say Maraderha, but they just squash it to Madera. And I think that's very funny as well. They just throw it in all the time. It's like pepper and salt, like in their food. Madeira is everywhere. To the point where people make fun of them, you know, like because they might throw in English words everywhere and they just put Madeira at the end of it, and it's perfect Connemara Irish. So it's very funny. But that's a great question.
Yeah, and also BBC had a series a few years ago on YouTube that also had both English and Irish subtitles, and the name of the series was Fadúda.
Oh,
so,
no way!
Yeah, so if you like Google Fadúda without the fada works, I think. So I think it was hashtag Fadúda. So the actual hashtag, not hashtag spelled out, of course, but the actual symbol of the hashtag Fadúda and BBC. It should bring it up if you put that into YouTube. Or just Google it or something, just Fadúda BBC, you should bring it up. And that was a very good series. It did like a tour, a black cab tour of Belfast, I remember. And there was other things like everyday life sort of things, like I think something about hairdressing, I think, or was it, or makeup or something, and there was something about cooking and exercise and stuff like that, and just someone going through like their daily routine or something. As Gaeilge. So it was very nice. It had both subtitles, so that was something.
Yeah. Actually, I saw, this isn't related to the question at all, but I saw TG Carter have they're starting meditation videos in Irish on YouTube. So there's a new Machnamh video of someone kind of going through meditation in Irish. So it's lovely. Okay, so let's see, is there any other questions? So there's one here from Airgid. What Irish movies would you recommend for learning the language and a bit of culture? I would recommend Song of the Sea or Amhrán the Mara. I'm trying to think. It's the name of the production company is Cartoon Saloon, and they're based in Kilkenny, as far as I'm aware. And they've made 3 very famous movies about Irish culture and Irish mythology. So there's Song of the Sea, Wolf Walkers is their most recent one, and then the Book of Kells I think they have as well. But I think Amhrán the Mara is the only one that's in Irish, I think, that they have available in Irish. I'm not sure about the others, I could be wrong now, but it is just stunning. It's so gorgeous. And there's a kind of folklore element to it as well, and there's music in it. It's really, really lovely. So that would be my recommendation. What about you?
The first one that comes to mind, it mightn't be the best or the nicest or anything, but it's the one, I think it was made in the 70s, Puchin. So that's if my memory serves me right, a feature-length film in Irish. And I remember seeing it on YouTube, so it could still be there. So Puchin. So it's not really for the faint-hearted. It's not a comedy. It's quite a serious film, but there's a bit of comedy to it too, that's for sure. But it has all elements to it. It's kind of like a Sheno song in a sense. You've got some comedy, and then you've got to go down to the darkest depths. So that's Puchin for you. So that's that film. Is there any others now? That's the only one that's coming to mind, to be honest. But there have been a few over the years. Mostly, though, I'm thinking of television series that were on TG4, but films now, I would say Puchin. I think there were a few others, possibly made by the same by the same crowd in about the same year as Puchin. So if you find Puchin, the film, and you look into whoever the director was and stuff like that, maybe, and whichever company made it, you could possibly find another film or two as well. So that's one that comes to mind.
There's you made me think of one there now, a very good one. Oh yes, Nuacht. I don't know if I haven't actually seen it yet, but
I haven't seen it. I'd love to though.
Yeah, I'd love to see it. So it's actually been nominated for an Oscar, I think, but it's the first movie about the famine that was made in the Irish language. So it's definitely not for the faint-hearted, and maybe during these times it might not be the most, uplifting thing to watch, but apparently it's absolutely phenomenal. I haven't seen it yet, but if you can find a link to it or find it online, it's meant to be brilliant. So that's a great way to learn a bit about the culture as well, because it's obviously something that happened. Okay, so will we take, I think there was maybe 2 more questions here that we could have a look at. So there's one from Jim, actually. Jim is a Grow member as well. And he says, "My chuid airgid equals my money. Then would something like my chuid airgid hain be like my very own money?" And yes, exactly, that's it. So you're basically putting more emphasis on it. So like if you got something with your money that you saved up, I spent my chuid airgid hain, I spent my own money on it, my very own money on it. So yeah, that's it, you're dead right. Just kind of adding a bit more emphasis.
And Edward is also a member. Agus Gorimila Mahagat Edward. Edward is best wishes on today. Ian Wardella.
Oh, there's one last one here I can see. So it's by Magilla Forke, and they say, "Antish, is there a specific order for it? For example, why is it mhall scoile and not skull mhall?" So do you want to answer that? I feel like, sorry, I'm robbing all the answers straight away. No, you go ahead.
There is mhall scoile. I suppose again it's about language. It's why is it school bag in English and not bag of school or bag school? It's kind of the same question in a sense. And you see this in different languages, so it is just the way it is in Irish. That's the basic answer. Mhall, but you can go into it more. Like, it does make, there is logic to it in Irish, because mhall is the bag and scoile, that's in the genitive, because the bag is connected to the school. The school is what is kind of adding colour to the bag. It's adding more description. The skull here, scoile is almost like an adjective. It's describing the bag. It's not just any old bag. It's a mhall scoile. So scoile is almost like an adjective. So that's why it's after it as well, because we put adjectives after words in Irish, almost always. There's the odd one we don't, but almost always we add adjectives after the noun. So that's one of the reasons why, because the noun is like the important thing, that's the name, and then whatever comes after it, that's kind of describing the noun or adding to the noun somehow, as is mhall scoile. So the skull there, that's just adding a detail or some sort of descriptive thing to mhall, to the bag, if that makes any sense. So it's like saying a schooly bag or something like that. So the school isn't the important thing, it's the mhall. It's the bag. It's the bag that's actually, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about the bag. We're not talking about the school. So that's why in Irish you put mhall first, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much it. I think if you want to if you're looking to compare it always to English, a lot of the time Irish will be the reverse of English. As you said, with the adjective, it will come after it. So yeah, in this case, scoile is acting as an adjective essentially, so it's coming after the noun. Yeah, I think you explained it very well. I don't think there's any more questions in here now. Thank you very much for leaving all the comments though. It's lovely to get some feedback and hear from me live. No, I don't think there's any more questions.
I think that's about it there then. Yeah, I'd say that's it. Sinné. Mar sin could we share a list mar sin is toch?
Yeah, is toch.
Mar sin gur míle maith í as gachrúd as a bheith lína nocht. So thanks very much for being with us tonight. It was nice spending this past almost hour with you, and it was great to be able to answer your questions. And as I said, lots of links will be in the blog post that's linked in the description of this video. Mar sin.
Gur míle maith Bisianias.
And just a trad. Slán go fólín.
Slán live.
Slán tamil.